County, the Ag Natural Resources. We also have on here Matt Boucher. He is the County Extension Agent in Victoria County. And many of you will see Lindsay Munion's named on the screen, and she's in College Station and doing a good job of taking care of us and keeping this meeting going and getting it put together for us. And again, this is being brought to you by the Southeast Regional Row Crop Initiative. It's a group of extension agents across this region and that have come together and brainstormed a little and trying to find some programming that fits a wider audience. So again, that's kind of who we are. We so this morning we'll have Dr. John Robinson, Dr. Mark Welch, and our guest speaker is David GIBSON, the Executive Director of the Texas Corn Producers Board. And with that, we also have the Texas Corn Producers Board, the Texas Sorghum Producers Board, and the Cotton Board, who are sponsoring this event. So again, thank y'all for all that y'all do to support our efforts, and we are greatly appreciative. So with all of that, many of you may see a chat. If you have a question, there's a chat spot down there. Just click on that and you should get a ribbon over at the side of your screen. Type us a question if you have one for any of our speakers this morning. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. John Robinson, our state cotton marketing specialist.
Thank you. Thank you, Bobby, very much, and Matt and Lindsay. So if Mark Welch can be enabled to share his screen, he's got my slides and he'll be flipping them for me. So while that's coming up, I'll just say that we've kind of entered the time of the year where the cotton market is in a tug of war between, and this happens every year, we're in a tug of war between the demand side of things and the uncertain production side of things. That happens every year, but this year is kind of exceptional because the demand side of things is in uncharted waters. Go ahead and flip it, please, to the next slide. So we're all still wondering about what will be the effect on cotton demand, particularly from the economic downturn as a result of the pandemic. And it's sort of a double whammy because number one, we're in a recession because of the pandemic, but we also have, not only do we have consumers, with less money, consumers worrying about their job, consumers tightening their belt. That's the recession effect. The double whammy is that we also have consumers who up until recently were probably forced by law to sit at home, and we had retail stores that were by law closed. So there's the sheltering effect on top of the economic recessionary effect, which if it's going to hurt anything, it's going to hurt consumption of cotton because that's sort of a non-essential cotton apparel, and home furnishings are sort of a non-essential type of product. So that's been the big question. So we're watching that unfold with various indicators. Go ahead and flip it to the next slide. And I had most of the items on the next slide were I had them last time we talked about this, but I can update them slightly. So we're all expecting the apparel market and therefore the yarn and therefore the lint market going all the way up the supply chain. We're expecting disruption, and we're seeing evidence of it. If you look back at April retail sales, they were off by a historic level. I think that's month over month, they were down almost 80%, which is incredible. And consumer apparel purchases in April were down 30%. Now the May numbers are out, and May saw a rebound, a bit of a rebound in retail sales of apparel. They bounced. They're higher than they were in April, but they're still way off year over year. So people went shopping in the month of May, and they bought clothes, among other things, but they're not back to the normal levels of clove purchases. And so that's ultimately that's going to affect the lint market. We've seen kind of good and bad export sales as an indicator of how this is affecting us. And we're still seeing cuts by market analysts and particularly by USDA to expected mill use. Go ahead and flip it to the next one. And we can see USDA's old crop is the column in the middle, and the new crop supply and demand numbers is the column on the right. And what I would focus you on is the mill use number. Domestic use is USDA cut it to 2.5 million bales, and they've been whittling down on that number for the old crop, and they're a little optimistic that it'll recover for the new crop situation to 2.8 million bales. But both of those are historically low, and they're not normal. They're reflecting a downshift. The other thing is that our exports number for the old crop is probably, it may be a little high. I'm not sure we're going to ship 15 million bales, and that's more because not so much of cancellations. I'm not sure we can just ship enough physically to get to the target. We'll have to see. But on both counts, the point to be made is that the demand side of things is down, and it's expected to be down, and it's probably going to outweigh any influence we get on the supply side. Since we're kind of focusing on the new crop situation, look over there to the right. USDA is still penciling in 13.7 million bales acres of planted acres, with a kind of average to high abandonment number. I'm pretty certain that acreage number is lower than that. I think it's going to be 12 point something, and the abandonment number is going to be higher than that. So we're probably still going to work out, if it was me putting in my numbers, I would say that instead of a 19.5 million bale crop, we're probably going to have a 17.5 million bale crop would be my expectation. But the point to be made here is you can cut 2 million bales out of this balance sheet, and you're still going to be left with 6+ million bales of ending stocks. So there's a lot of room to lose production because of bad weather, dryness, wind events like we had in the high plains. There's a lot of room for production to be lost and still leave us with a burdensome amount of ending stocks. So what's the effect of that on prices? Flip it to the next slide, please, for me. Well, one effect is that we're not getting the normal sell-offs in a bearish situation, or buying into rallies, rumors of windstorms and droughts. That's what typically happens this time of year, is that the speculators read the farm press and they kind of throw gasoline on the fire. They'll pull the market down lower than it should, and they'll push the market higher. They're not doing that this year. They're being really hands off, and they're not doing much in the way of influence. So they're not having their usual thing. Go ahead and flip it to the next slide, please. So what we've seen basically is after bottoming out the market back in around April the 1st, we've had kind of a steady climb, about a 9 or 10 cent recovery. Futures prices have gotten back over 60 cents, and now they've settled back into the 58, 59 cent range, and that's where we continue to hover. With things, with people worried about the crop, with discussions of abandonments and things like that, and bad, harsh conditions in West Texas particularly, I expect, the market has a chance. I think futures will probably go back over 60. I think they may get to 62, 63, maybe 64. But if I had to guess, I would say that's probably all she wrote in terms of what we'll see over the summer. And then we'll get some benchmark production reports, and the uncertainty will kind of fade out, and we're going to be left with the weak demand side of things. I kind of expect us to be trading from a mid-50s to a mid-60s kind of kind of situation with the highest prices probably in the next couple of months. Like I say, 63, 64, 65, and then I expect price weakness to kind of kick in. I don't really think the demand disruption to the apparel markets and all the way back to the cotton market, I don't think that's going to get worked out for many, many months, and probably not until 2021. Flip it to the last slide for me. So that kind of pretty much sums up the questions we have that are going to get resolved in the next, they're going to get resolved by August or September. How many acres we have, how much abandonment is there, and are we still left with 6 million bales of ending stocks? And if we are, then there's really no reason for futures to rally, and we could well slide, like I say, back in under 60 cents when it's all said and done. Flip it one more time. I think that's summarizing what I just said. And one more time, would you, to my last slide. Well, I guess my only thoughts on the matter are we've got government safety net payments kicking in. They've been positive. They're going to get smaller if futures go to the mid 60s, but they'll get larger again if we slide back under 60 cents and slide to the mid 50s. If that was to happen, I would lock in those payments when it comes to LDPs anyway. Lock them in as best you can, and you could actually hedge them by thinking about buying cheap call options or something. Or, yeah, call options, call spreads when we think those government payments have sort of maxed out. And that should be my last slide. Bobby, I'll hand it off to Mark Welch.
Thank you, Dr. Robinson. Again, if you have any questions for him, just put them in the chat box, or if something comes to you later, you can email me or Matt, and we will try to get your questions answered. But again, thank you for being on with us this morning, and we appreciate all that y'all do. Dr. Mark Welch, he's the state grain marketing specialist, and I'll turn it over to him.
All right. Well, jump in if you can't hear me or we lose the screen or something, Bobby. Good to be with y'all again today. I'll just leave Dr. Robinson. Sorry, I should have slipped that last slide there, John. There again, his contact information and email. Follow-up questions for John. As we look at the grain market update today, I've got a cluttered mess of weather maps right there, and that's kind of what we may be looking at over the next couple of weeks, is bouncing this grain market off of what the latest updated forecast shows us. That top chart, or top portion of the slide there, is the 6 to 10 day temperature and precipitation probabilities. And you can see most of the Corn Belt cooler and wetter. And then you go to a longer outlook out to the end of June to the July the 10th. We see a warm pattern that can develop there as we move toward silking and tasseling. And then perhaps below normal precipitation. So, these are the kind of factors that we'll be watching as we move forward over the next several weeks. That's the chart that when we were together last time, about a month ago, we were looking at a corn market that was trying to show some degree of bottoming out. And the question was whether we had the fundamentals in place that would support that as a bottom, and perhaps move towards some of those price objectives that we've indicated there on that line. And to this point, we've been able to hold that trend line. However, certainly haven't seen enough price strength to knock out any of those objectives at this point. And we'll talk about more of that here in just a minute. Of course, overhanging the market for new crop is the information that came from the prospective plantings report back on the 31st of March. And that's when U.S. farmers indicated they were going to plant 97 million acres of corn this year, up from about 90 million in 2019. Combine that with USDA's initial yield projection of 178.5 bushels per acre, an all-time record high. We'll have a large increase in corn supplies just coming out of production numbers for 2020. And of course, combining that with an additional carryover from old crop, hit primarily by what's happened in the fuel sector. So we've got more corn left over, a bigger crop coming, and that's certainly weighing on our markets moving forward. However much we plant this year, it went in the ground right on time. The black line there in the middle is the long-term average for planting progress. The green line would be a record quick pace for getting the crop in the ground. The red line, the record slow pace. Much of those numbers, of course, set last year, but this year's crop went in the ground just right at its long-term average. If you look at these early season crop condition ratings, we're starting out with some 70 to 75% of the nation's corn crop rated as good and excellent. And that's not unusual for early June. One thing we did notice in Monday's crop progress, a trimming of some of those positive conditions. We saw no change in the excellent category, but the percent of corn rated good actually declined by 4%. The fair increased by 3%, and the poor increased by 1%. Now, we can create an index out of those ratings, multiplying the amount by very poor times 1, poor times 2, fair times 3, and so forth. And we can create a long-term average of a crop condition score, and that's that blue line. And then the black line indicates this year's rating. So even with the small decline in conditions we saw last week or this week, we are still just above average for this time of year. But of course, watching the weather as we move forward will certainly give us some guidance. Perhaps are we looking at something at trend line yields, which the blue line would suggest, above trend line yields if we see ratings above that long-term average, or something below trend line yields if we see that crop condition score start to drop below that blue line. That's a look at ethanol production. Of course, gasoline consumption fell hard in the month of April, as did ethanol production to meet the demand from that fuel sector. We're seeing now the recovery over the last several weeks. We'll get an update on this number at 10:30 this morning. And as we've seen the rebound in ethanol production, we're back to about 20% below the average level of production for this time of year here in early June. Gasoline consumption, about the same. It's down about 20% from where we were a year ago. The Energy Information Administration projects that by the time we get to August, that we could possibly see gasoline demand and ethanol production back up about where we were at the beginning of the year. And so if we do continue to see the economy open up and demand increase, certainly be positive for our ethanol consumption, ethanol production, and for that corn for fuel sector. But all those factors combined give us a stocks to use ratio, and the number I like to use is days of use on hand at the end of the marketing year that are going to be some of the highest numbers we've seen in almost 40 years. So we're looking at, again, additional carryover from last year, a big crop on the horizon for 2020, and that projects USDA's days of use on hand for the U.S. crop on August the 31st of 2021 of an 82-day corn supply. That would be up from about that 57 days, which is projected for this August 31st, the end of the 2019 crop. And to put that into perspective, what an 82-day supply looks like in terms of a price relationship, that's where 80 days gets you on that price line. The numbers on that chart indicate the days of use on hand at the end of various marketing years, and the price response in terms of the season average farm price over on the left axis. When we've seen record high corn prices, we've seen that days of use on hand get below that 40-day threshold. In 2019, we're at about that 57 days, and you can see that's where we've been the last several years, 2017, 18, 19, maybe 16's in there too, of clustering right around that 350, 380 a bushel range. An 82-day supply pushes us far, far to the right on that chart. And if this were 2005, we might expect $2 corn. But it does indicate the pressure that kind of supply will put on our prices if that projection holds. And again, that's based on several factors. The drop in demand for old crop and 97 million acres yielding 178.5 bushels per acre. And of course, that's not settled at this point by any means. Just a note on where the speculative traders are in our corn market. Dr. Robinson mentioned the cotton situation. They're really not getting too aggressive buying or selling cotton futures. That is not the case in corn. The green bars indicate the degree to which they are net short or they're at record low net long positions. In other words, they've got a lot more bets for lower prices than they've got for higher prices. And in fact, we are seeing, since this chart has been gathered, this information since 2003, we've never seen speculators this short the corn market before. So they're heavily betting on lower corn prices. Now, this information was updated as of last Tuesday. We'll get the update on Friday for their positions as of yesterday. And so our price chart, again, using USDA's numbers and their season average forecast and my price model for corn, if we do at current demand numbers, if we planted that 97 million and yield 178, we're looking, I think, at futures prices. This is for our, kind of our Midwest centered folks, and up in the panhandle of Texas, an October futures price in that 320, 330 range. I think that could put us there pretty easily, and hopefully we can hold that. Can we hold that uptrend? That first price objective I've got there, we kind of got close, just short covering. I think we could pop up to 350. We're going to need some kind of, I think, a weather scare and short covering to get us something to 360. If we saw short covering, a weather scare, and fewer acres, could we see something short term back up to that 360, perhaps even 370 corn? That would take a combination or a compilation of some of those factors really turning this market around. Fundamentals are possibly there, but we've got a lot ahead of us to achieve those kind of objectives. But certainly if there's some opportunity perhaps to get a price floor put into something around this 340, 350 range, there's some possibility we could go higher, and that's why I like some option strategies. But certainly the downside is something we cannot ignore, that fundamentally that would pressure prices considerably lower from where we are right now. There's some challenges in this environment. I like this quote from a banker at Wells Fargo back in 2013. Corn prices were coming off record highs. We were falling hard in September of that year. In fact, we lost $2 a bushel from July to September in 2013. And they mentioned that, in these challenging times, we back the jockeys, not the horses. When we're in the race, we want to work with folks that have a plan. We want folks that are prepared. We want folks that are communicating with us about their needs, their challenges, and how they're going to face these situations. It takes time, it takes discipline, and it takes building those relationships. If we can help with any of that information, that's what we're out here to do. So please let us know. Bobby, that's all I have, and I'll turn it back over to you.
Again, thank you. Very good information, and we do appreciate you getting on with us early this morning as well. So thank you, Dr. Welch. So now we have David Gibson, who's the Executive Director of Texas Corn Producers Board, and we're grateful for him to be on with us this morning, and I'll turn it over to him.
Well, this was supposed to be real simple to jump to share my screen. Worked just fine. Has it come up on y'all's picture yet?
Yes, we see it.
Okay. All
Okay,
right.
there you go. Now you got it.
Yeah, some of us guys are kind of technically challenged at times with all these new things we're learning. It looks like Mark and John have got it mastered. If John can't do it, he sends it to Mark. I'm not sure who Mark goes to, but we all
It goes to you.
Lindsay.
Okay. Appreciate all of y'all asking me to be on this morning. I want to just kind of hit a few things. Every time I hear Mark talk or other economists talk, it always prompts a lot of thoughts versus kind of what I hear. We do weekly calls with all our state execs from around all of the corn states, and sometimes we hear things different than what USDA puts out. This much like happens in the world, and a lot of times they're closer, and there's a lot of good corn in the U.S. Number one, we have 5 districts in our state broke up. I'll kind of show those. You can see probably who we're talking to today is down in regions 4 and 5. Our directors from 4 that some of y'all's neighbors are Daniel Berglund, Charles Ring, and Jim Shigerick. And down in Region 5, we have Colin Chopless and Dustin Dickerson that represents you guys. And they're always open and willing to take your calls and visit with you about what we're doing, either as our board and association, which we do have two things in our office. We have our board that administers the checkoff funds. It started back in 1980, went statewide in 1990. I think a lot of y'all have probably seen this. We are under the oversight of Texas Department of Agriculture. And what we use our checkoff dollars for are education, promotion, and research. In our association, we have 15 guys that serve on that board. Many of them mirror both boards mirror each other real well. And as you saw, I listed who your members were. That's where we do a lot of all of our legislative activities, both national and state, and work on policies. So one of the things I want to talk about just briefly are some of our partners that we work with. We work with U.S. Grains Council. You know, Charles Reen was one of the board members for U.S. Grains Council representing Texas corn, and currently still serves as the delegate to U.S. Grains Council. That's our marketing arm that we support. We get some good reports that there are good demands for corn. We're seeing countries saying they're going to be buying and buying around the world, and hopefully we're going to pick up some market through U.S. Grains Council. We've gone to promoting and selling promoting the use and selling of ethanol and distillers grains, which helps move some more of that corn, as Mark related there about the ethanol industry. And quite honestly, if we weren't moving that, what we're moving out into the world market, our picture would look even worse. You know, when we go back and look at that, even, you know, big part of our carryover this year is going to be due to falling oil prices that made ethanol, gasoline and ethanol prices fall. And, you know, we have 4 plants in Texas, and we had 3 of the 4 shuttered a big part since about the 1st of April. And that just mirrored the rest of the country. And when those plants aren't going, with that being 5 billion bushels of our demand, I've worried all year about what really is going to be our carryover. I mean, you see the projections, but, you know, whenever plants aren't running, and I hear from my associates around the country about all of their plants not running, that's been a major concern in David's mind as to what's really going to happen there. We work with national corn growers on everything from sustainability through policies. We are members of the U.S. Meat Export Federation for the pork, beef industry. We have membership on their board, and they travel around the world promoting our meats. We also are affiliated with the USA Poultry and Egg Export Council. Kind of a small known fact that not a lot of people know, we actually export more corn through the poultry side than we do through the beef side out of the U.S. So that's a real important market for us. Recently, this past week, I was listening to U.S. Grains Council give a report. And, you know, we compete against the world. We're in a world market for all of our commodities now. And one of the projects the Grains Council was doing was pulling samples of U.S. corn and corn that was grown in Argentina and Brazil and comparing them in starch plants around the world. And it comes out that as they didn't sample these as they left the boats. They didn't sample them as they came into their facility. They went to their storage bins, pulled samples, and found out that our U.S. corn was outperforming in the starch plants by about 3% over any of the corn from around the world. You say, well, 3% doesn't sound like much, but in those big plants, 3% is money to the owner. And we're using that as a strong selling point to try to increase that market even more. So some of our checkoff dollars all went into doing these surveys, getting these analyses run. And quite interestingly enough, when I heard this, then they reported, you know, some of these plants were back in the market looking for more U.S. corn. So that's good for us. Whether we send them Texas corn or Iowa corn, it all comes off that balance sheet, Mark, that's out there. I want to hit a few things we're doing on research. It's kind of pertinent to that part of the state. Dr. Brewer has a study on the effects and value of biological products available for dryland field corn. Looking at some things that came up, Charles Ring and Colin Chopless had brought in concerns from some farmers and questions, and I think Bobby, maybe Matt, both been involved some in some of that work. Evaluation of corn traits for efficacy to air feeding insects. We've got David Kearns working on that. He's looking at some resistance to some of our traits and things, and we are seeing some resistance, and that's real concerning with how hard it is to get EPA approval of new traits or anything new through EPAs. It's really hard to do. I'll talk a second about that on another note. We've got Dr. Kearns also looking at corn seed treatments and in-furrow sprays as techniques to reduce planting costs. There again, we've had a lot of questions from growers. Is some of this stuff worth what it costs? We get told good stories by those selling it. Sometimes we can't see it on our farm, so they wanted to get an independent study done looking at some things there. And then Dr. Snell is working on some things for herbicide resistance and weeds. And I know from traveling down there, y'all have the same problem there I see across the state with some herbicide resistance. The thing that we've been working on to add into aflatoxin control is a new product to come in and be available in conjunction with the Afligard and with the Prevail or AF36. We worked with Dr. Cotty up till his retirement just a year ago, and we've been looking at a multi-strain product, and some of you agents and a few growers down there have been a part of the field studies that we wrapped up in December of 2019. Here's where EPA comes in. We thought we were close to having that approved and was hoping to have it in the market for the 2020 crop. And then they come back and said, we need to know how many honeybees visits cornfields. This is EPA. We need to know if what y'all are using these biological controls for are killing honeybees. So we had to add 2 additional tests this past summer. And actually we just wrapped up the one looking at see if the for sure had any toxic effect on to help that would cause decline in honeybee populations. Interestingly enough, we had documents going in that said that basically honeybees don't visit cornfields very much. And the things we're looking at in our for sure, as we've trademarked it, are naturally occurring and really don't affect honeybees. But we wound up having to spend big part of 2019 and just, like I said, wrapped up another study and several thousands of dollars proving to EPA what we all thought was common sense and knew that it really was true. It's just such a slow process getting through EPA with any new product. Right now, we're in the 6-month review process. Hopefully, if they don't come back with something else for us to do on the for sure, hopefully we'll have limited quantities available commercially. It'll be marketed in 2021. You say, why another product? Well, as we were looking at resistance in weeds and we look at resistance in insects, we're trying to stay in front of any chance that the Afligard or Prevail and for sure that we don't run into something, because we've had good success using these biological controls to help manage aflatoxin problems. Bryce White, who works for us, is our producer and relations director, and he does a lot of the meetings down in that part of the country. And y'all if you haven't seen him, you will be seeing him. I know this year it's been really different. We haven't been able to be out and travel. It looks like we're having virtual field days and different types of ways of doing that, and we'll be participating in whatever methods that were available. As he said, I'm David Gibson. I've been now with the Corn Board for about 20 years. I've came from the elevator industry, and I was county agent a long time, worked in the elevator industry. Whenever we saw some of that $2.50 corn Mark was talking about, and that wasn't a pleasant thing even then, much less now with our price inputs. And so we've kind of been around the horn here a long time. I just want to kind of reiterate a couple of things. It's going to be important for us in the corn and grain markets to see, as bad as I hate to say it, some higher oil prices that'll bring our gasoline prices back up somewhere. I'm not advocating for $3 a gallon gas, but we need to get that oil price back up to about $50, $60 a barrel. And if we do that, then that's going to help enhance our ethanol production. We need to see packing plants back working. We need to get all these cattle and all the livestock through the chain in order to maintain all of that usage. And if we don't see some of those things really kind of level out, I think I'm maybe even a little more concerned about the markets. That's just being speculative. But just this week, I had a young man that I'd worked some with on some marketing send me a deal that, you know, speculators have record net shorts in corn, and they're spreading it against long soybeans. And that's just really concerning to me and what the future looks like immediately in the market. I hate to be a pessimist, but that's why we're out there working with Grains Council, working with policymakers and all that we can in order to ensure we get our corn used and maintain some floor under this market. These large acreage for this year is a big concern. A lot of the Midwest states and here even in the South, we're having growers come and talk to us about supply management, some different things. Kind of brings back, I think Mark can relate back when we had supply management and all the problems we had, but some of our producers are younger and they don't have that experience. So a lot to learn, a lot of things to look at as we look at challenges we've got in the corn world and the world of agriculture today. I'd take questions. I appreciate y'all letting me be on your program today.
Gibson, we greatly appreciate the Corn Board update, and thank you for jumping on with us early this morning. Just a quick note, please, if you have any comments or anything to help us with this program and anything that we can do to make it better, if you want it longer, shorter, just let us know, please. And I left my email in the chat box, but here they are again. So please feel free to give us a email, shoot us an email, and we will do our best to see what we can do. Matt, do you have any further things that we need to discuss or?
No, sir. I monitor the chat. There's not any questions unless somebody wants to unmute their mic and actually ask a question. But once again, we appreciate everybody being on the call. If you would help us publicize this, that would also help. I think there's a lot of great information that's out there that's useful for folks. And we look forward to seeing and hearing from y'all next month in August.
Yes, thank you. And we will hopefully have this recording available in a short period of time, and we will send that out as well. So if there's not any other comments or questions, I guess, Dr. Robinson?
Yes.
Did you have something you wanted to comment on?
No, but other than thank you for having us again. And it'll be some influential times. The next time we meet, we'll have an acreage report under our belt. So some benchmarks are going to happen and the markets are going to change. So people need to hang on and we'll see what happens.
That is true. It's going to be it's on it, the harvest and that time is on top of us right now. So good luck to all, and there's not anything else. Well, I guess this update is concluded.
Hey, thank you.
Thank you. Thank
Good to
you.
be with y'all. Thank you much.
Bye-bye.
Lindsay,
Yes, sir.
I guess we got a recording. I forgot to even ask.
Yeah,
Yes.
she got it.
I got y'all. Yes, it'll be a cloud recording again.
Yeah,